The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. For a moment, the silverware on the table seemed to blur and swim. My Uncle Raymond's voice carried across the mahogany dining table with the casual cruelty of a man who had never once considered that words could wound. "You can hitch a ride on my jet, Danielle, but there are rules," he announced, silencing the rest of the table so everyone could witness his generosity. "Don't bring that beat-up duffel bag you always drag around. Try not to embarrass us in front of my investors. Just sit in the back, keep your mouth shut, and don't touch the single malt." The table laughed. My aunt, my cousins, the business partners who didn't know me from the catering staff. I felt my fingernails pressing crescents into my palms beneath the tablecloth as heat crawled up my neck. The chandelier above us threw fractured light across the remains of the surf and turf. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could look so beautiful while something inside me was quietly breaking. My name is Danielle. I'm 34, and I work for the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is the story of how I taught my uncle the difference between wealth and power. To them, I was poor Danielle, the cautionary tale they whispered about over shrimp cocktails, the niece who couldn't afford business class, who drove a 10-year-old Honda, who wore the same black dress to every family function because designer labels weren't exactly in my budget. What they didn't know was that my poverty was a carefully constructed lie. In my world, we call it being a gray man. If you look important, you become a target. If you look like a logistics clerk who struggles to pay rent, nobody looks twice. My cousin Brittany, the bride-to-be whose entire personality existed for Instagram, treated me like a charity case she could feel magnanimous about. She made a show of offering to lend me something from last season that might fit my frame for the reception. Uncle Raymond jumped right in, cracking a joke about my sedan, asking if the engine was held together by duct tape and government prayers. I smiled and took a sip of water, swallowing the response that burned on my tongue. They had no idea that the beat-up duffel bag they mocked contained encrypted hard drives that could destabilize 3 foreign governments. They didn't know that when I disappeared into a windowless basement at work, I wasn't sorting mail. I was entering a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, where biometric scanners read my retinas before granting access to systems where a single keystroke could reroute a drone strike or burn a spy network to the ground. I looked at Raymond, who was bragging about bribing his way out of a parking ticket. I thought about the decision I'd made last Tuesday to extract a compromised family from a safe house in Damascus. The silence I kept wasn't weakness. It was the trained discipline of someone who carries state secrets in her head worth more than his entire portfolio. But our worlds were about to collide. I stepped away from the table to answer a secure line. Colonel Nathan Webb, my commanding officer, didn't waste time with pleasantries. His voice came through like grinding gravel. "Danielle, we're tracking movement on your locator. You know the protocols." "I'm visiting family, Colonel." "You're currently holding the decryption keys for Operation Black Sands in your head," he countered. "You're a walking vault. If you go off-grid for more than 60 minutes, the Pentagon assumes you've been compromised. Do not board any transport that hasn't been vetted. I don't care if it's your grandmother's minivan. If we lose your signal, we escalate." He was right. Hopping on a private jet with a man who treated flight regulations as suggestions was a tactical nightmare. But I was tired. Tired of being the difficult one, the niece who caused scenes. So I compromised. I opened the secure portal on my phone and logged a movement request with the tail number of Raymond's jet. It was a digital breadcrumb telling the Air Force, "I am here. I am safe. Do not panic." I assumed Raymond's pilot would file a standard flight plan. If our records matched, the military's tracking software would show green across the board. I didn't know my uncle planned to fly off the books. No manifest, no transponder squawk, no record. He was going to run a ghost flight to dodge a few thousand in fees. He thought he was being clever. The United States Air Force would think he was kidnapping me. The next morning, we drove to the private aviation terminal on the outskirts of the city. I rode in the back seat of Raymond's Mercedes, sandwiched between luggage and his investors' golf bags. While they discussed market opportunities I could have bought and sold with my annual bonus. When I walked onto the polished concrete of the private hangar, the sharp smell of jet fuel mixed with my family's familiar disapproval. Raymond stood by the stairs, eyeing my carry-on like it was a bag of garbage. "Jesus, Danielle." I told you to travel light. Stash that in the galley. You can sit in the jump seat next to the coffee maker. I climbed the stairs without responding, moving past the cream leather recliners reserved for his investors. Same dynamic as every Thanksgiving since I was 12. Allowed in the room, but only at the margins. As we taxied, I heard him holding court in the main cabin. I don't file standard manifests, he bragged, clinking glasses with a heavy-set investor. Keeps the government out of my business, saves me 10 grand in fees, told the pilot to file a ghost plan. My blood turned cold. A ghost plan meant flying dark. To Raymond, it was clever tax evasion. To the defense algorithms tracking my location, it looked exactly like a hostile extraction. If this plane took off with me aboard and the transponder didn't match my filed log, the automated defense grid wouldn't see a niece going to a wedding. It would see a Tier 1 asset being moved off-grid at 500 miles per hour. The system doesn't ask questions. It neutralizes anomalies. I could have screamed. Explained that he was about to trigger a national security incident. But I knew Raymond. He would laugh and tell me to go back to my corner. So I didn't scream. I slid my phone from my pocket and pulled up my encrypted chat with Colonel Webb. I typed a message that would change everything. Civilian transport vectoring non-standard. Squawk code likely invalid. Do not shoot us down, just intercept. I hit send and watched the encryption lock confirm delivery. Then I reached into my pocket and found my keys. Next to my apartment key sat a small black fob that looked like a garage door opener. It was a panic beacon linked directly to the nearest military command post. Raymond was telling another story about how he'd gotten a senator to back down. He had no idea that with one press of a button, I'd just invited the entire 1st Fighter Wing to our location. I pressed it until I felt the silent, tactical click. The aircraft didn't just stop. It lurched violently as the pilot slammed the brakes, sending Raymond's crystal tumbler flying. The cabin went silent, broken only by the frantic voice crackling over the intercom. "We have a situation. Tower just locked us down." Before Raymond could respond, the air around us shattered. A roar louder than anything a civilian jet could produce tore through the fuselage. I looked out the porthole just in time to see the twin, vertical stabilizers of an F-22 Raptor screaming past at low altitude. The investors actually ducked. Outside, black SUVs swarmed the tarmac like angry insects, cutting off every escape. "What is this?" Raymond screamed, his face purple with rage. "I'm a platinum donor. Get my lawyer on the phone." He didn't understand. He thought this was about taxes or flight logs, something he could fix with a checkbook. The cabin door didn't open. It was breached. Armed Air Force security forces stormed up the stairs in tactical gear, carrying rifles that weren't for show. Raymond jumped up. "Now listen here. You can't just barge onto a private—" A defender shoved him back into his seat with one hand. "Sit down, sir. Hands where I can see them." Then the chaos parted. A man walked onto the plane with different energy entirely. My beacon automatically routes to pre-designated contacts when activated. Major Tyler Griffin was on the response list from our previous operations together. He scanned the cabin until his eyes locked on me. He didn't see a niece in a jump seat. He saw a superior officer. He snapped to attention, his salute razor sharp. "Ma'am, command received your beacon. We have a Valkyrie alert active on this vector. We cannot allow an asset with your knowledge base to depart on an insecure civilian craft." The silence was heavy enough to crush a lung. Raymond stared at the major, then at me, his brain trying to reconcile the mail clerk with the woman being saluted. "Her?" He laughed, high-pitched and nervous. "She's just a clerk. She sorts mail. Arrest her for wasting government time." Major Griffin turned slowly, looking at Raymond with the cold detachment you reserve for a hostile combatant. "Sir, step back or you will be neutralized. This individual is a protected national security asset. You are currently interfering with a federal operation." Neutralized. The word hung in the air, foreign and violent in Raymond's world of boardrooms and golf courses. One of the security officers stepped forward with a tablet displaying the intercept authorization. "Sir, this operation is classified Yankee White. Everyone on this aircraft is now subject to federal jurisdiction." The pilot stumbled forward from the cockpit, his face ashen as the officer turned the screen toward him. The pilot didn't need to understand the military codes to recognize he was in serious trouble. Raymond's face went through something fascinating then. Confusion, disbelief, and finally, the dawning horror of a man realizing he'd been punching down at someone who could have destroyed him at any moment. Major Griffin gestured toward the cabin door. I unbuckled my seatbelt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I stood and walked toward Raymond, and then I stopped, right in front of his seat. Every holiday, I said quietly, my voice steady and cold. Every dinner, every family gathering for 30 years, you made sure I knew exactly where I stood. The jump seat, the kids' table, 3 blocks away so my car wouldn't embarrass you. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. You were so busy making sure I felt small that you never once considered I might be something more. That maybe the quiet ones are quiet for a reason. I leaned closer. You just tried to take a classified intelligence asset off the grid on an undocumented flight. Do you understand what that looks like to the Department of Defense? It looks like espionage. It looks like trafficking. And your platinum donor status isn't going to mean a damn thing when they start asking why a defense lobbyist was hiding the transport of a DIA analyst. The color drained from his face. I didn't know, he whispered. No, you didn't. Because you never bothered to know anything about me beyond whether I might embarrass you at dinner. I straightened and smoothed my jacket. Enjoy the investigation, Uncle Raymond. I hear they're very thorough. I walked out of the cabin without looking back. Waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs wasn't a shuttle bus. It was a Gulfstream C-37A painted in the stark gray of the United States Air Force. Stars and bars blazed on the tail. A security detail of 4 defenders formed a perimeter around me, their movements synchronized and lethal. I climbed the stairs to the military transport and left the poor relation narrative on the tarmac, along with my uncle's impounded ego. The Air Force flew me directly to the wedding venue. I arrived 2 hours before the ceremony, changed into my dress in a hotel bathroom, slipped into a pew just as the processional music started. Brittany never knew how close her wedding came to being disrupted by her own father's arrogance. The aftermath was catastrophic for Raymond. Because he'd attempted to fly an unlisted ghost flight with a classified Tier 1 asset aboard, the federal government didn't view it as a tax dodge. They viewed it as potential espionage. The investigation was cold and binary. Why would a defense lobbyist hide the transport of an intelligence analyst unless he intended to sell her or her knowledge? He was detained on the tarmac for 48 hours, interrogated in a windowless room by agents who didn't care about his net worth. His jet was impounded for a counterintelligence sweep. His custom Italian leather seats ended up in an evidence heap. The 3 investors who had been aboard were detained separately and questioned about their knowledge of the flight plan. 2 of them immediately cut all business ties with Raymond once they were released, unwilling to risk their own reputations by association. He missed the wedding. While his daughter walked down the aisle wondering where her father was, Raymond was trying to explain to the Department of Justice why he thought federal aviation laws were optional. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd spent years making me feel like an outsider who wasn't good enough to make the cut. Now the system he claimed to master had physically removed him from the most important day of his daughter's life, all because he couldn't show basic respect to the person sitting next to him. 6 months later, I was at my desk inside a SIF deep within the Pentagon when a physical letter landed on my desk. Thick paper from a D.C. law firm, Raymond's lawyer. It wasn't a lawsuit, it was a plea. The investigation had spooked the Department of Defense. Raymond's security clearance, the lifeblood of his lobbying career, was under review for revocation. He needed character references from a current government official with equivalent or higher standing to vouch for his patriotism. He was asking me to save his career. I held the letter and thought about the kids' table at Thanksgiving, the time he made me park 3 blocks away, the way he looked at my shoes, my bag, my entire life with that sneering pity. He'd spent 30 years treating me like a liability, a smudge on his reputation. Now he needed the logistics clerk, the niece he couldn't be bothered to respect, to sign her name and give him back his livelihood. I walked to the heavy-duty shredder in the corner, the one rated for classified documents. I fed the letter into the teeth of the machine. I didn't watch it disappear. I just listened to the satisfying rhythmic grinding as his plea for help turned into confetti. 3 months after that, I heard through the family grapevine that Raymond's clearance had been permanently revoked. Without it, his lobbying firm collapsed within the year. The man who once bragged about having senators on speed dial was now consulting for a regional insurance company. His Gulfstream sold at auction to pay legal fees. Brittany eventually learned the truth about why her father missed her wedding. She called me once, crying, to apologize for how she'd treated me all those years. I accepted her apology, but we both knew the relationship would never be the same. The rest of the family slowly pieced together what had happened, though none of them ever asked me directly. Some bridges, once burned, stay that way. I grabbed my jacket and walked out into the main corridor of the Pentagon. 2 generals passed me, deep in conversation, and nodded with genuine respect. I nodded back, feeling the weight of the badge on my lanyard. This was my family now. People who judged you on competence, reliability, and honor, not your bank account. My uncle wanted to teach me a lesson about my place in the world. I'm just glad the United States Air Force was there to help him find his. Real power doesn't need to scream to be heard. It doesn't need to humiliate others to feel important. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous one to underestimate. If you've ever been the quiet professional surrounded by loud egos who thought your silence meant weakness, I want to hear your story in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.